Right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of delegated decisions by the Cabinet Member for Transport. My name is Gareth Epps and I am said Cabinet Member for Transport. We have an agenda pack of only 576 pages today, so things are heading in a positive direction on that front. I have a number of public speakers, but I will just go through the items of the agenda in the order that they are published. Please do make sure that electronic devices are switched off or to silent mode to avoid any unnecessary interruptions. He says, slightly nervously trying to work out where his phone is. Especially on a morning where there might be important government decisions about the future of the councils in Oxfordshire being announced. Moving on to the agenda, declarations of interest, there are none. Questions from county councillors, there are none. On petitions and public address, we have 3 registered speakers, some speakers speaking on multiple items. County councillors have up to 5 minutes to address the meeting and members of the public have up to 3. Danny Yee, I think, has requested to speak now. Danny, you are speaking on agenda items 6, which is active travel guidance for streetworks, and 9, which is Lady Grove East. If you'd like to come forward and say what you're going to say. You've got 3 minutes on each item, please, and I'll make a note and then address those later.
Thank you. I'm speaking on behalf of Oxfordshire Liverpool Streets on item 6, active travel guidance for streetworks. This is an excellent policy. It takes the county's policies on active travel and the hierarchy of users seriously and seems comprehensive. It is also clear and easy to understand, which is important not only for the contractors who will use it directly, but for people in the county walking, wheeling and cycling to be able to understand what they should expect around streetworks. Communicating this to contractors and getting them to follow it will remain a challenge, but this policy lays the basis for better provision for walking, wheeling and cycling through and around roadworks. I have a couple of corrections which I won't go through in detail because I've emailed them. I think in paragraph 822 there are some typos. Basically it has more than 3 metres when it should be more than 5 metres for shared, for separating provision, walking and cycling provision. Although if it's one-way cycling, you can get away with less. And it says shared use is acceptable if there's less than 3 metres width, when actually it should be more than 3 metres width. I think the minimum width for a shared use path is normally 3 metres. And the final thing is that it might be useful to explicitly reference LTN 120, that's in cycling infrastructure design, table 5.3, which is the extra width necessary if there are vertical obstacles alongside cycle lanes or tracks, because that almost always gets forgotten. So that ends that there. You might want to restart your timer. This is on the DIDCOT proposals. Basically off Abingdon Road on the A4130. Something has gone seriously wrong here. As part of the housing being put into the east of the A4130, a key requirement should have been the provision of walking and cycling links to the town centre and the railway station. But we are not getting that. We have a 30-metre gap in the cycling provision on the east side and a toucan crossing that connects only to a footpath. The officer's assumption is that people cycling will dismount. Now this is just not acceptable on a cycle route. LTN 120 says quite bluntly, routes should be complete with no gaps in provision. And it's also an equalities issue. Many people cycling can't dismount. Some people with disabilities, and some people riding cargo or larger cycles, and so forth. And since the cycle route is only as good as its worst segment, this is a failure of the whole scheme. Also, this is not at all realistic. Nobody in practice is actually going to dismount. What will happen is that some people will not cycle at all, some people will cycle on the footway, even though it's not a shared path, and some people will cycle on the carriageway. The development should not have been approved without a plan to provide a continuous cycle route, and measures should have been taken to fill the missing gap. It's obviously too late to deal with that now, but there's some easy measures that could still be taken to ameliorate the harm done by this failure. While 2 metres is too narrow for a shared path, given a choice between a short stretch of substandard shared path and no provision at all, we think the former is a better option. So we ask that the 30 metres of 2-metre wide path be made into a shared path rather than a footway. To support people who choose not to use that and to cycle on the carriageway, we ask that cycle symbols be placed in the middle of the southbound lane and a dropped curb be placed opposite the bus stop to allow people to move from the end of the proper width shared path, or the actual separated cycle track, I think, onto the carriageway. And the speed limit should be dropped to 20 miles per hour on the section of road lacking cycling infrastructure, or, if my suggestions are followed, with substandard provision. This would make cycling safer and more accessible both for people who opt to cycle on the carriageway and for people who cycle on the too narrow footway or shared path, because they'll be cycling against the traffic. They'll be cycling directly at 30 mile per hour traffic with no buffering at all, on a 2-metre wide footway. Also, driver compliance with signal crossings is better with 20 mile per hour speed limits. So I would suggest 20 mile per hour speed limits cover both Toucan crossings and the Tamar junction. More generally, we think officers should always be willing to consider narrowing the carriageway to improve walking and cycling routes.
30 seconds.
Here, that could provide not only continuity, but also a buffer along the A4130 between the carriageway and the cycling and walking provision. With 30 mile per hour traffic, the desirable minimum buffer between a cycle track or shared path is 0.5 metres, and Transport Development should be asking for that instead of always allowing developers to get away with the absolute minimum of no buffer. And also, lowering speed limits should always be considered where walking or cycling provision is missing or substandard. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Danny. I think what I'll do is ask officers, I'll pick up on the key points you've made there and ask officers to respond when we come to the appropriate item. Thanks very much for that. We'll come to other speakers later. Agenda item 4 is minutes of the previous meeting. We need to approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 18th of June. I don't have any particular comments or issues, so unless anyone objects, I'm happy to approve. Thank you. Now on to item 5, proposed changes to the MyBus ticketing scheme. I've got Alan Jones on screen who's going to present the item, but can I ask Robin Tucker to speak on this, please? Robin, you've got 3 minutes.
Thank you. Robin Tucker from the Coalition of Healthy Streets and Active Travel. This paper makes clear that the MyBus ticket has been a great success, partly due to the cross-network basis and partly due to its price. We understand that the council currently reimburses the bus companies for the difference to previous ticket prices, and the success of this ticket has resulted in an unexpectedly large cost. We know that the council is not made of money and that any funding essentially has to come from somewhere else. However, before making this decision, we ask you to consider these 3 factors. First, we know from local news and our own encounters that young people are finding it hardest to pay for, well, everything, and that public transport is part of that mix. There is a real opportunity to keep them away from their own or their parents' cars. For a multi-million-pound decision, there is no research here on the likely effects on how people will be affected, but the impact assessment notes that 5 of 9 protected characteristic groups and 3 out of 4 additional communities that OCC assesses will be negatively impacted. Second, the paper notes that there has been bus usage growth, which is great news, but you don't know how much of that is due to MyBus, and no research has attempted to find out this, or what would happen to people's journeys if the prices were increased. And the paper makes no mention that you have asked the bus companies to share the opportunity of keeping MyBus at a lower price, possibly somewhere in the middle. Finally, when the Cabinet agreed the BSIP strategy in 2024, it included MyBus on the basis that it would provide, as I quote, a more attractive joined-up fare offer, and in the case of young people, better value. In other words, Cabinet specifically authorised a discount for young people. The role of MyBus has not been considered in the context of the Oxbus 2040 strategy either, and that is still under development, nor in the light of funding that may be available from the zero emission zone expansion or the workplace parking levy. This proposal essentially asks to reverse part of a Cabinet policy decision without consultation or with a view to the long term. This all feels like a bigger decision than a simple pricing one that will significantly impact people with less money, and we are concerned that you do not yet have enough data or consultation to make it confidently. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. And I think before we start on this, I think I would certainly agree that this is a policy that's been a great success and clearly beneficial. And it's only down to the inadequacy of central government funding in many ways that we're in the position that we are with it. And it's very much in that context that I'm going to look at that. But Alan, could I ask you just to introduce the paper, please?
Yes, of course, Councillor Epps. Good morning, everybody. Would you like me to start with a reaction to the statement just, or would you like me to go through the paper first?
As you wish.
Okay, so yeah, if I can put into context some of the comments that were recently delivered. So in terms of the impact assessment, groups, we are required obviously to submit a straightforward impact assessment, and the wording is quite specific. At this point, we should add that groups would only be negatively impacted. So the groups that were referenced in the impact assessment would only be negatively impacted if they regularly use the service of multiple operators. Some of the research that we have gone into this process and the use of MyBus tickets has identified a significant number of people who are buying the tickets for convenience rather than essentially because they require to use the services of more than one operator for the period of that ticket. We are also required through the Department for Transport's enhanced partnership guidance to maintain a multi-operator ticket, but it should be priced accordingly. The current prices, and indeed the prices in the early stages of the scheme, which has now been running for 2 years, were significantly less than some single operator products. So we had to address that gap as well. It should be noted that within the FAQs that we've drafted in readiness for any changes, that we do reference the opportunity to, and we do provide links to individual operator websites so that people can interrogate whether they are indeed travelling using the most cost-effective ticket for their needs. And it should be noted that locally, at least one operator offers significantly discounted tickets for under 16s, which I understand is £1 single. And just finally, on the Oxbus plan for 2040, that is very much being written as I speak. We are still going through the iterations of what will be included within that document, as well as the Enhanced Partnership Plus document that is also being developed in parallel. There will be significant emphasis placed on fares and ticketing within both documents. So yeah, turning to the report itself. So we are asking for, well, we're recommending that an implementation of ticket price increases from the 1st of August or as soon as practically possible after this date should be agreed, to delegate authority to the Director for Environment and Highways in consultation with the Cabinet member to cancel or postpone any future or potential further increases or amendments within the available budget, to approve the utilisation of £300,000 that remains available from last year's bus grant, to enable officers to move forward with the introduction of a 28-day monthly MyBus ticket from at the latest 1st of April, as required by the government guidance, to introduce a simplified reimbursement approach for smaller operators, and a standard refund policy for MyBus tickets. So, as has been referenced already this morning, the MyBus ticket has been successful. It is wholly funded by our DFT bus grant, which we now have confirmation of it continuing for this year and the next 2 financial years. Demand has been exponential, it's fair to say, particularly for day tickets and amongst young people. The funding that has been allocated for this year is sat at £900,000, and without significant change, that we will significantly increase our exposure to costs, which are estimated to be between 2.6 million and 3.2 million for this particular year, which is clearly unsustainable. We outline the financial position, the options considered, and a recommended approach to ensure the scheme's sustainability while supporting the council's objectives and government statutory guidance. So the survey that was undertaken in 2025 included 110 respondents, indicating that current usage is primarily driven by value for money, with many passengers using the ticket for single operator journeys, as I mentioned earlier. Whilst this supports affordability, it means the scheme has not been entirely used in accordance with its primary objective of providing an integrated solution for multi-operator journeys. A scheme review has been undertaken to identify a sustainable approach that maintains integration, simplicity and affordability as much as possible, while reducing the funding gap and aligning with our requirements through the enhanced partnership statutory guidance. The recommendations represent a necessary move towards greater financial sustainability for the scheme, whilst preserving the core benefits. The recommendation does not preclude short-term targeted discounts being offered on MyBus tickets in the future where budgets permit. A revenue generation charge for operators was considered to reflect any additional bus use created by the scheme. However, it is difficult to robustly demonstrate how much patronage growth can be directly attributed to MyBus. The potential savings were also considered insufficient to justify the risk of operators withdrawing from the scheme, which would have clearly impacted passengers significantly. So in terms of the wider background surrounding this decision, so last year we allocated a £700,000 budget. We have moved to increase the allocation of bus grant from 700,000 in last year to 900,000 for this year and the 2 years following. We were able to support the scheme with the reallocation of funding on a temporary basis last year, but that will not be possible for this year and beyond, because a large chunk of the bus grant revenue that we are in receipt of actually supports delivery of a whole host of rural bus services, which would otherwise not exist. I've already mentioned, but just to reiterate, government guidance on minimum standards for enhanced partnerships states that a multi-operator ticket must be maintained by all local transport authorities across England, which would include a monthly ticket, which we will introduce no later than the 1st of April. So as referenced elsewhere in the paper, the success of the MyBus ticket has undoubtedly been partially, at least, as a result of the increase in the national fare cap that was introduced in January 2025, a mere 6 months after the MyBus scheme was introduced, which made it much more popular than it had been previously. Just to mitigate the scheme, certainly in the early stages, to mitigate the increases proposed, certainly in the early stages, government has recently announced a Department for Transport funded Great British Summer Savings Scheme, which offers free travel for children aged 5 to 15 inclusive during the month of August. Should operators choose to take part, and my understanding is that the majority, if not all of the operators in Oxfordshire have now agreed to participate, sales of MyBus Young Person Day and Week tickets are expected to fall significantly during that month. However, this may be partly offset by increased adult travel, including additional MyBus Adult Day and Week ticket purchases by those travelling with children. The overall reduction in scheme costs is therefore likely to be lower than the fall in young person ticket sales alone would suggest. In terms of conducting the review, the principles and process applied have been to provide a simple and integrated ticketing product for the whole of Oxfordshire, which facilitates multi-operator journeys, to provide a good value ticket offer in particular to young people aged 16 to 18 who would otherwise have to buy an adult ticket, and to encourage greater bus use. I should note at this point that the cost of my bus, both in terms of the proposed prices for my bus, both in terms of their day and week ticket, represents broadly 2/3 of the cost of the adult fare. So it does still provide a discount for those aged 16 to 18 inclusive. Operator sales and usage data were reviewed to determine how and why the tickets are being used. That showed that value for money appears to be the primary driver, combined with evidence that many passengers use the ticket predominantly to travel on services provided by a single operator. This suggests the scheme is more likely to be encouraging switching from existing commercial ticket types rather than predominantly facilitating multi-operator journeys, which is what its primary intention was. A long list of possible scheme changes options was created in collaboration with the Enhanced Partnerships Making Buses More Attractive working group. Whilst reducing the cost of the scheme is a pressing factor, the list also includes options for improving the scheme. The table at Annex 4 presents 17 options that were reviewed, along with their principal advantages and disadvantages and ranking following a scoring process. The recommendations to introduce a simplified reimbursement approach and to introduce a standard refund policy were not assessed as part of the options appraisal. These are intended to improve the admin and consistency of the scheme and are not expected to have a material impact on costs, demand, or user outcomes. A summary of the recommendations, recombinations, is to introduce ticket price increases from the 1st of August or as soon as possible thereafter, to bring fares in line with comparable commercial products whilst maintaining scheme affordability into the future. Should the August changes enable the required savings, then the further increases proposed as potential for January 2027 may be reduced or cancelled. And as mentioned earlier, once we have an indication and confirmation of how these changes would affect the overall scheme costs, then we can make different decisions by running potentially different promotions or further variations. It should be noted that the proposed cost of the adult day ticket is more than the respective Smart Zone and Stagecoach county-wide ticket and slightly less than the Go-Ahead county-wide equivalent. The young person day ticket is 65% of the adult price, which is broadly comparable to the commercial ratio. And we, as an authority, as a local transport authority, have no direct control over the setting of individual operator commercial fares. So in summary, we are going to apply the carry forward from last year. We do fully intend to introduce a 28-day ticket product, and we will be simplifying the arrangements and refund policies. I think, Councillor Epps, unless there are any questions, that summarises the paper.
Yes, Alan, thank you very much for that. And this is a situation in which I didn't want us to find ourselves, and there are a number of questions that I've got and a number of comments. And one of my intentions with this, having spoken to some operators and others, is to write a letter to the Secretary of State, excuse me, outlining the position we're in. And the fact that we are faced with having to make unpalatable changes that put a number of our residents, particularly younger residents, at a disadvantage in a way that is unacceptable and is almost entirely down to the actions of central government, who are cutting our budget by £24 million and at the same time failing to fully fund a highly successful policy which delivers a wonderful bit of simple integrated ticketing, which encourages people to use buses rather than cars, and cuts across some of the major challenges we find on our bus network. Just to run through what you've said and try and bring out some of the key points. The original scheme was predicated on the £2 fare cap. That went in January 2025, which resulted in a huge surge in demand due to the differential between this fare and multiples of £3 tickets. changing.
Yes, that's correct.
And there was no decision taken at that time to modify my bus accordingly, but there was a pricing increase in at the end of last year, as I understand it.
We did actually introduce a change to the weekly ticket prices in January, but unfortunately that did not have the desired effect. In fact, in March, we actually doubled the number of tickets sold compared to a few months before the change. So it didn't have the desired effect on our overall scheme costs.
Yeah.
But yes, the £2 to £3 definitely saw a significant growth, and unfortunately, we did not review the ticket prices in 2025.
Okay, and I mean that notwithstanding, we're now in a situation where we have a shortfall of around about £2 million a year.
Yes.
In the context of additional financial cuts that we're expected to find, and by means of context, our total subsidy for the entire bus network in the county is £1.2 million a year. So to pay for this, you'd either have to find a cut that would be the equivalent of removing all the subsidies to rural buses, which would be catastrophic for rural Oxfordshire, and still have to find additional cuts of a similar amount, or somehow find other non-statutory services where you could cut, where you could find a similar saving. And we know that there is very, very little left in which to do that. I think is that an accurate summation of the financial side of where we now sit.
So the £1.2 million is OCC core funding. So we as you correctly say, Councillor Epps, we do support the delivery of non-commercial or not commercially viable services that would otherwise not exist. But it must be added that we also provide in excess of £3 million subsidy as part of our bus grant that has been confirmed for this year and the next 2 years, which is the main use of the bus grant that is used to subsidise the My Bus scheme.
Yeah.
So again, we would have to cut half of those services that are bus grant funded as well in order to get close to being able to reimburse My Bus at existing prices if they did not change.
Yeah, and the problem that we have is that bus grant funding that goes to My Bus is £900,000 per annum, whereas the total cost of providing the service at the current ticket price levels is between 2.6 million a year and 3.2 million a year. So that clearly doesn't add up.
Without intervention, that's correct. Yes.
Yeah. You mentioned something about, and I'm very, very conscious of the disproportionate impact that these recommendations would give on young people under 19, which is the part that I find particularly unpalatable. But you mentioned that alternatives exist. Are you able to tell us a little bit more? You mentioned that there was one operator that provided a £1 fare for under 16s.
Yes.
If we are talking, and we've got students in the room on work experience, if you are looking at this from the perspective of someone who is age 15, 16, 17 and looking at the cheapest way to get about, how do they go about finding out what these alternatives are?
So if this change is accepted, we will be publicising on the Oxfordshire Bus Enhanced Partnership website a set of frequently asked questions, which will have links to the three main websites. So that is the Go Ahead, the Stagecoach, and the Red Group websites, all of whom offer their own single operator products. It's the importance of and to stress really that in our findings, granted from a small sample, many people were using MyBus for convenience. So rather than having to worry about whether they were catching a Stagecoach bus or a Go Ahead bus or an Oxford Bus Company bus, or indeed a Red Group bus, they were just buying a single ticket, then not having to worry about, you know, whose bus they were travelling on, because it's not always evident. However, there are a raft of single operator products, and it's not just day, week and month tickets, particularly for students attending education who are obviously going up to the age of 18 and beyond. There are season tickets for terms and half terms, which actually provide incredibly good value for money. And we do have to be mindful within the process of maintaining a MyBus multi-operator ticket, that we have to be mindful of the market, and that if we were to maintain prices that were significantly less than the single operator alternatives, then that could create problems of its own.
And that brings us, I think, nicely to one of the points that Robin Tucker made, and one of the points that I wanted to bring out, which is how we have or haven't considered in preparing this paper, asking the bus companies to share the opportunity of having a universal ticket at a lower price that may form something of a halfway house, given that we have this statutory obligation to produce a multi-operator ticket. Surely it's in the bus company's interests to buy into that in the spirit of partnership. Just
yes.
to respond to that point that Robin made.
Absolutely, and it's a very valid point, Councillor Epps. So we are in the throes, as I mentioned earlier, of introducing a bus plan up to 2040, and we are also required by government to introduce an enhanced partnership. We have decided to introduce an enhanced partnership plus, which will contain a plan and a scheme or multiple schemes, which will legally enforce the partnership working going forward. And within the plan, but in particular within the enhanced partnership plan and scheme, we will be placing significant conditions on both ourselves, the partnership, and the participating partner operators. And we are fully promising to explore all opportunities to that end. So, for example, we are progressing plans to introduce a tap on, tap off technology to as many of our operators' buses as possible, and that will again be funded this time from capital that we have also made available to us by the Department for Transport through the bus grant. And at the point we can have tap on, tap off more widely operated, then we will be able to introduce capped fares. So which is similar to to how that happens to the current situation, has been the current situation with Oyster in the Greater London area. So we are completely committed to making transport, public bus transport in particular, as convenient and as attractive and easy to understand as possible. And we will be taking forward the various fares initiatives through the Enhanced Partnership Plus, and that will be introduced later this year for formal delivery in early 2027.
Okay, and it strikes me that would be a very useful thing to examine further in the plan for bus, and I wonder whether that would make Jack a suitable additional recommendation that we take forward an examination of multi-operator tickets and potential opportunities to add value for customers through that strategic plan. I think that it strikes me as an Oxfordshire wide. We may not be Oxfordshire wide, who knows? We'll find out very soon. But for whichever bits of Oxfordshire are left after the government have finished with it, it would be very, very helpful, I think, to have that in my bus plan. And I'm aware that other authorities have found themselves in a similar position to us, having tried to introduce a multi-operator ticket and having tried to do the right thing. They've then found themselves, with the policy being a victim of its own success, essentially. I wanted to also ask, based on, again, on one of Robin Tucker's questions, what research has been done to look at quantifying how much bus usage growth there's been as a result of this particular policy? What do we know? What can we quantify? And are there any assumptions we can make?
So the sample survey that was done at the end of 2025 was 110 people, which is accepting. I accept the fact that that is a very small sample. It is quite difficult to engage with, particularly with certain groups. We do participate in the Your Bus Journey surveys that Transport Focus have been undertaking for us in recent years, I think 5 or 6 years now, concurrently, that we've participated, and we have got overarching results around overall satisfaction, which is continuing to increase. We're now standing at around about 85% overall satisfaction with the network. However, fares was one of the areas that we would like to focus on. Hence the, as you say, Councillor Epps, the focus that we need to give to fares and integrated transport within our bus plan and within our EP Plus that we're developing. So we do propose to undertake a citizens' assembly later this year, which and we are meeting with as many groups as we can. Indeed, my colleague Catherine is actively engaging with a whole host of different groups across the wider spectrum on ideas for the bus plan, but also the emerging highlights that we intend to include within the EP Plus. We also have a wider partnership forum meeting that's occurring tomorrow. So we will continue to garner information, but yeah, we do need to learn a lot more about how individual people are using MyBus and whether indeed they would have had other opportunities. But the indication from the small sample survey is that a decent number of those 110 would have benefited from a single operator product instead of MyBus.
Okay, and given the disproportionate impact on this on this potential change on young people, I'd hope that any research could include some specific targeted research through Oxfordshire Youth, I think with representatives of young people in the county. It strikes me that they have the access to youth clubs, youth councils, and groups like that. And I think a youth voice forum, they've been doing an awful lot of work on youth voice. And I know that there is interest from speaking to some of them directly about this. I think that might be a really, really useful way, both of establishing some of the full facts about customer experience at the moment, but also looking to see how we can best keep the principles of this coming forward. That probably covers my questions. There was an enhanced partnership meeting where I was able to raise this with bus operators, and as I said at the start, my intention is to write formally to the Department of Transport, setting out that we think the policy here is a good one. We think it delivers considerable benefits, and we think it needs to be enhanced, and we think it needs appropriate support from government. And I'd intend to write to them immediately once this meeting is over. I think we do need to make sure we've got the information on operator websites. I think I would like to make sure and make clear in the have an additional recommendation that we do take forward the examination of the multi-operator product in the MyBus plan, and that specifically includes an element of research involving younger people through the representative organisations that we've got within the county. To look through the recommendations, we need to balance the books clearly. So in terms of recommendation A, we will unfortunately and regrettably need to implement ticket price increases, as is said here. I want to come back to the issue of delegated authority for a potential further increase, because I don't know that we should be looking to delegate on this. I think it is of sufficiently significant sensitivity that there is a strong case for this coming back to this meeting. Recommendation C talks about carrying forward the remaining bus grant funding of around £300,000 to further support the costs of this scheme in this financial year, which I think is the right thing to do to cushion the impact of what we're doing. Recommendation D is the government statutory requirement about a new 28-day MyBus ticket product from the 1st of April, which I'm absolutely fine with, and we'll clearly need to set the price for that. And it'll be interesting to see under a new Prime Minister whether some of the parameters of this change, so we can look at that in due course. Recommendation E, a simplified reimbursement approach for smaller operators. Yes, absolutely. We need to support those smaller operators. I have a number of those in my division, and that's a good equity point. And recommendation F, a standard refund policy. I do think, and I'll invite officers to come back, I think the impact of this, looking at the equality impact assessment, is such that I would be reluctant to delegate authority for a further increase at this point. I think I would rather ensure that we are having an open dialogue about it. I want to give government the opportunity to come up with a more progressive and equitable approach, frankly. And I think it would be right that if we do need to consider a further increase, yes, we clearly need to do that. We are under an enormous amount of financial pressure, but I think we should probably do that in this meeting, in this forum. I don't know if officers have any comments about that. Paul, I think you might want to.
It was only just to double check, I suppose, with Alan, to make sure I've understood our conversation and what's written here, is that it's almost, if it goes the opposite way, so it's obviously to cancel or postpone the further increase in fares in January 27. So it's almost, if we need to make it better for members of the public, then does it need to come here again? Have I answered that correctly, Alan?
Sorry, yes, absolutely, Paul. It is following further review, certainly in the months that follow August and September. We will be keeping a very close eye on this, and that should get us to the point where we don't need to suggest a further increase, and indeed potentially we can review and offer a different type of scheme or different types of offers in conjunction with the operators going forward. That's worst seen scenario. Yeah. The January increases would be worst seen scenario.
Yeah. So these recommendations talk about the implementation of ticket price increases, which is the significant increases that are in the table on pages 30-31, item section 18 of the report. For the August 26 increases, it's not clear to me where the approval is for further increases that are listed in the final column of that table, described as potential future change January 2027. And I'm just looking, probably Paul, to you to see whether there is some sort of deemed approval within here, because at the moment the way the recommendations are worded, I'm not sure if these recommendations are seeking approval for both increases or for that first set. I think it's a little bit ambiguous.
Alan, can you confirm?
Yeah. So as I mentioned a few moments ago, the potential change in January, which adds 50p to each of the day tickets and £1 to the adult and £3 to the young person would only be implemented if the changes that we propose from August do not deliver a situation where we can financially
So sorry, Anna, just to cut across, I suppose it's more from what are you seeking from this decision, i.e., bearing in mind obviously the recommendations talk about obviously delegation to not needing to implement the potential change in January 27. Are you seeking as part or assuming as part of this decision here that almost the proposals for August 26 and January 27 are made today? And if not, where would those decisions be made?
So I suppose to be fully complete, recommendation A should have said implementation of ticket prices from 1st of August and 1st of January. But in the context of the report, we can just take the opportunity today to, as Councillor Epps has proposed, defer on recommendation B or ask for that to come back to CMD to a future opportunity if we feel the need. I do agree that there is some ambiguity between A and B. Apologies.
I think the ambiguity, I think, is not necessarily just between A and B. I think is the sort of what is being approved here today. So I think because a lot of the discussion has been obviously around the price increases from the 1st of August 2026, I think we probably do need another paper in terms of determining what we do in January, in which case probably if we remove the recommendation B, i.e. not take that forward, then it's very clear that this meeting here is obviously determining what's for the 1st of August and the remaining pieces, and we will have to come back. This is a bit of a heads up, I suppose, to what we think we will need to do in January, but I think, as you say, it's quite an important decision, and therefore we should probably have it bring back a paper to enable a good hearing.
I agree.
Yeah, I think that's right, and I think it will also enable us to gather some further information in terms of increase to single operator tickets to see whether there are people who transfer to use some of those other options, and then the discussion that can take place through Oxfordshire Youth, for example, can start to pick up actually what does that look like from a customer perspective? Are there good single operator options out there? Can we encourage operators to offer single operator tickets that will help the vast majority of people and cushion the impact of what's being proposed here? I'm very, very conscious that many young people find it particularly hard, as Robin Tucker said, to pay for public transport. The introduction of My Bus removed a significant barrier to movement and access, as well as doing the right thing for our LTCP objectives. And what I'm being asked to do today is partly reverse that decision. And I would only do that with deep, deep regret, setting out the causes of this come very, very largely from central government, and I'll write to the Secretary of State, whoever that may be, to seek a better way forward on that. And then through the process we've got with the plan for bus, we can take forward a bit of research and come out with a set of policies that I think will fit well with the enhanced partnership, but involve operators, most importantly, include a strong element of youth voice there. So with that in mind, Jack, do you just want to clarify?
So what I'm hearing is that recommendation A, C, D, E, and F would be approved. You would reject or defer recommendation B, and there would be an additional recommendation which I've drafted, which would be G, which would be to explore the possibilities of future multi-operator tickets through the Oxbus 2040 Plan for Bus and Enhanced Partnership Plus, and engagement with youth organisations, if you're happy with that.
Yes, thank you. I'm not sure I'd use the word happy, but yes.
just for clarity, I don't think we're talking about deferring B. I think we're talking about not progressing with it. So probably reject. Yeah.
Yes, I think that's right. So we will take forward recommendations A, C, D, E, F, and new G. I'm reluctantly content to approve that, and as I say, I will be writing. And I'll be writing to the Secretary of State. Thank you, and thank you for bearing with me, and thank you, Alan. I appreciate this has not been an easy process, but I think it's worthwhile just making sure we've asked the right questions and we get to a place where we're doing the best thing we possibly can. So thanks very much for that.
Thank you.
We now come on to agenda item 6, which is active travel guidance for streetworks promoters. Robin, I think you are down to speak on this, and then I'll ask Phil Whitfield to introduce the paper.
Thank you. Danny Yee has already spoken in support, and we at COSAT are also very pleased to see and support the active travel guidance for streetworks. It has been sadly common for walking, wheeling and cycling to be an afterthought in some works, and this can make journeys difficult for people, particularly disabled people. This guide is excellent for pulling together material from other sources and adding material to cover almost every situation. It also includes issues such as skips and advertising signage. The draft version was already good, and I will praise the lead officer, Phil Whitfield, for consulting stakeholders and taking on board additional feedback that has made the guide even better. Given such good guidance, I have 2 questions which are all about implementation, if it is approved today. First, how will it be implemented and enforced with the many contractors working in the county, some for this council, but many on their own account or for other utilities? Second, we have members in our groups who are particularly affected by unlicensed advertising boards in our streets. I call out Cowley Road as a particular example where these reduce the usable pavement to less than 2 metres, sometimes less, and block people in wheelchairs, mobility scooters and with pushchairs. According to the government's website, OCC has not delegated enforcement powers and so has the sole ability to enforce against these. Will OCC get more active in enforcing against these obstructions? And I've produced some examples for you. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Robin, and also thanks for the examples on that. Phil, would you like to introduce the paper, please?
Yep, no problem. So, Councillor, this report seeks approval of Oxfordshire County Council's new active travel guidance for streetworks, as mentioned. As I'm sure members, colleagues will all be aware that active travel sits at the heart of the Oxfordshire County Council's local transport and connectivity plan and has its own supplementary active travel strategies. Whilst existing streetworks legislation and national codes of practice already require consideration of pedestrians, cyclists, etc. during streetworks, they do not provide detailed practical guidance on how these requirements should be applied on the ground. The purpose of this document is therefore not to create new legal requirements or to replace additional burdens beyond those which already exist. It is there to bring together, as Robin has alluded, existing legislation, national guidance and best practice into a single Oxfordshire tailored document, which clearly sets out the Council's expectations for those carrying out work on our network. The guidance has been informed by work undertaken elsewhere, including Transport for London and Transport for Wales, but as I say, tailored for an Oxfordshire specific specific requirements, and has been developed in consultation with relevant internal services, and has been out for sort of an informal external conversation really with stakeholders. It has been designed to promote a more consistent and considerate approach to active travel users and ensure that their needs are considered at the earliest stages of planning, rather than relying on issues and works being identified during a routine inspection when a site is live. Ultimately, this is about improving the quality of temporary traffic management, reducing disruption, improving accessibility, and ensuring that active travel remains safe and attractive as a choice even when works are taking place. So the recommendations today are to note the developments of the process undertaken, approve the guidance document endorsing its contents, to delegate authority to the Director for Environment and Highways to make future amendments in consultation with yourself as the relevant cabinet member as national guidance and best practice evolve. Back to sort of Robin and Danny, so I'd like to thank them for their input into the document, which has been really helpful. There was a few bits where you think you have it covered, but that Oxfordshire specific piece comes through even more clearly. And as Danny mentioned, he has emailed me a few sort of typos and amendments, which I've reviewed and I'm happy to accept. Addressing Robin's comments, so on implementation, the guidance will be promoted really through our existing arrangements with utility companies, contractors and internal teams, for example, through local hawk briefings, which are the forums where local authorities and utility companies, statutory undertakers come together. And guidance will also be uploaded onto websites, so when people are applying for permits, it is a document for them to consider. We will revisit training with our inspectors to make sure that they are clear on the Oxfordshire expectations and can be enforced more clearly when out doing their inspections. But as also alluded, compliance does ultimately depend on the organisations carrying out the works. And I'm hoping that through this rollout and through this reinforcement, it will help drive higher standards across the county. In relation to the advertising boards, I recognise the concerns that have been raised, particularly around the width of footways. So whilst today's decision is specifically around the adoption of this guidance, I'm more than happy to pick that up outside to see how we can best support. Thank you.
Phil, thanks very much for that, and thanks for that really positive response, I think, to both public speakers. I think that's a really good bit of co-production. This is an area, anything to do with streetworks is vexed. I've had past experience in my day job at dealing with this. I've had very recent experience as a local county councillor in dealing with a particularly challenging and intrusive bit of streetworks. And it strikes me that what has been done here is to pull together best practice in a way that, frankly, I think few other non-metropolitan or national authorities have been able to do. So I think that's going to be really helpful. And I think parish councils, town councils, local councillors will find this really useful. So I'm very grateful for that piece of work. It is a challenging and vexed topic. I've had plenty of examples, and the public speakers have mentioned the egregious use of cyclists dismount boards often unnecessarily, in a way that at best causes confusion and at worst increases road safety challenges. I think the consultation here has been very useful. I guess the challenge will be, given the difficulty of getting some streetworks operators to comply, to get them to understand all of the measures that there are and pulled together as they have done. But I think this will make it easier. So, I mean, on that basis, I'm very happy to proceed, and I'm really grateful to you for putting together this bit of work. I think it's very positive.
I was going with sort of one statement. As you say, there will be a challenge around bringing people up to speed, but none of this will come as a surprise. Everything in this document is what is expected of people as routine anyway. We're just trying to take it to what is acceptable for Oxfordshire and sort of not accepting the bare minimum.
Yeah, and certainly I might alter that to say none of this should come as a surprise. But yes, you're absolutely right. I'm very happy to accept those recommendations and approve this. And thanks to you and your team for pulling together this work. This will be extremely useful as a step forward, and I think we should be bold about speaking to it, and particularly talking to our parish councils about it. And I'll certainly make sure I add it in my next report to them, which I'm going to need to update today. So, thank you very much. We'll move on to agenda item 7, which is another fairly weighty item. This is the 20 miles an hour speed limit proposals for Carterton. Robin, I think you're down to speak on this one. You've got 3 minutes there, and I'll then ask Anthony to introduce.
Thank you. There is a simple fact that a collision at 30 miles an hour will most likely kill you, and at 20 miles an hour you are most likely to survive. When the Banbury 20 mile an hour speed limits were introduced in 2024, North Bar Street was left out against protests from us and other residents because a local councillor considered it more important that traffic could travel faster through the centre of town. We did not know at the time, but a man, Anthony Payne, had been killed on a pedestrian crossing by a driver travelling, according to the police, between 29 and 36 miles an hour in the 30 mile an hour speed limit. The speed limits on North Bar Street were only then reduced. Urban speed limits can save lives. We note the large number of objections to this scheme. However, as the officer's report correctly identifies, they are all almost on incorrect premises and made almost entirely without evidence. One cites the Queen's University study of Belfast, which is known to be unique in having low impact due to already being slow-moving traffic. We look at the most definitive meta-studies to date, the review of citywide 30 km/h speed limits benefits in Europe, looking at 70 studies in 40 cities, and evaluating the safety and speed limits of the 20 mile an hour speed limit in the UK, which examined 20 studies. These meta-analyses conclude that 20 mile an hour speed limits reduce crashes by about 25 to 40%. The objections that people may not obey the speed limits are nullified, as they show that there are significant reductions in crashes and casualties for sign-only schemes. Objections about increased pollutions are nullified by the European study showing emissions are reduced by an average 18% and fuel consumption by 7%. This is also indicative of the smoother driving style that 20 mile an hour speed limits encourage, which will also reduce damage to roads that appears to be a cause of a lot of complaints and will save the council money. We strongly support this well-targeted scheme overall for these reasons, and we support the Goddington and Swimbrook schemes in following items as well. We agree with many that there should be more 20 mile an hour coverage near schools. Virtually all of Carterton is within 15 minutes walk of a school, and so all of the roads should really be 20 miles an hour. We're particularly concerned at the proposals to remove from this proposal the section of Uphaven Road outside Little Giants Nursery and Carterton Community College.
30 seconds left.
And the section of Burford Road outside Carterton Primary School. These two sections we strongly believe should be reinstated to the scheme. We note the near universal support for 20 miles an hour near schools and that the relevant bus company did not object to the scheme. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Robin. Anthony, would you like to just introduce the paper and the background to this, because there's clearly been a large number of public comments and some subsequent discussions. So I think if you just frame that, thanks.
Sure, yeah. So this scheme comprises part of the OCC 20 mph transformation project, which is pretty much coming to the end. This is the last major scheme in terms of geographic extent that has yet to be approved. The background is that Carterton Town Council engaged with OCC officers working on the project, which actually was prior to my time in the project, but identified a scheme as taken to consultation in summer last year, August, September. Perhaps it's worth commenting that as with one or two other larger towns, Banbury and Bicester come to mind, unlike other schemes that have been taken through the programme, I'm not sure whether this is quite the right word, the flavour of what Carterton Town Council wanted to do was test waters is not perhaps quite the right word, but they were happy for us to take to consultation of quite a comprehensive scheme, but then they, as it were, reserved the right to then comment, having digested the consultation responses. So we carried out the consultation, as I said, in August, September last year. We then met with Carterton Town Council, who to review the responses, and then they themselves went back to within the town council to form a view on what scheme should be that they would lend their support to. That did take them several months, and it was actually only in the last couple of months, I think in May, that we received confirmation from Carterton Town Council that they would like to proceed with the majority of what was taken to statutory consultation last year, but with certain roads omitted, principally Alverscough Road and also Blackwater Road. I think the details are in the report, but those are perhaps the two main roads, and also parts of Burford Road. What they were happy to do, however, just take on board the comments about safety outside school. They were happy to retain 20 MPH proposals on Uphaven Way adjacent to the community college, and also on a stretch of Burford Road by the primary school. And so what this report is recommending is, given the town council have reconfirmed their support for this slightly cut down scheme, if we are recommending approval of that, we have had confirmation from one of the county councillors, Councillor Field Johnson, that he supports the town council's view. We haven't, I think, seen explicit confirmation from Councillor Overton or Councillor Fenton, albeit they have very much been involved in the discussions on that. But the position is officers are recommending proceeding with the slightly cut down scheme. We acknowledge that the balance of public response was very negative. I think in part we would anticipate that negative response will be to repeat the statutory consultation on the revised scheme. I think we could anticipate that certainly a proportion of that, those objections would not be repeated. Of course, we can't be sure, and unless we were to repeat that consultation.
Thanks, Anthony. That's very helpful. And there's clearly been some fairly involved correspondence with Carterton Town Council, who I think have been admirably engaged in this, and this is detailed, I think, on pages 110, 111 of the report. I think they initially set up a road safety committee, and that came partly, as I understand it, after a child was subject to life-changing injuries back a couple of years ago on Wickham Way, which triggered a serious amount of concern, and that's a road which is particularly badly engineered. And I know that there are calls down there for some traffic calming, subject to some budget there. So the notion that is mentioned in a number of consultation responses that there are no serious road accidents in Carterton is frankly not true. I just want to, and then subsequently, the town councillor has, I think, responded very positively to public opinion. And you mentioned the comments of one county councillor, which I've seen by email after the report was published, supporting that. And I think they've tried to come to a considered opinion which tries to balance, I think, the views and the objectives which Robin set out earlier about the road safety objectives, with an attempt to engage with aspects of public opinion where they've talked about a universal 20-mile-an-hour limit in somewhere that was, designed in the way that Carterton was. I mean, I can certainly remember the day when there was a 40-mile-an-hour limit on Up Avon Way, even though it has got schools on there. I just wanted to start by just being clear about the parameters of the recommendation here, because within the recommendation, Up Avon Way isn't mentioned in the paper recommendation, which I thought was very odd, because reading the Town Council's revised proposal, which is essentially what we're looking to take forward here, I thought that Up Avon Way was earmarked for a 30-mile-an-hour limit, which I think is currently the case. But then in paragraph 23 of the report, it said that there would need to be a further statutory consultation required for that short length of Up Avon Way adjacent to Carton Community College. And again, I think there was some confusion that Robin highlighted, because that wasn't proposed to be reduced to 20 in the 2025 consultation. That will be carried out as soon as possible. So what we are going to need to do, which doesn't require a decision today, is for there to be further consultation about that section of Up Avon Way immediately west of Burford Road, where you've got the community college and you've also got Little Giants Nursery pretty much next door to it. And my understanding is that section is proposed to be 20 subject to further consultation. The rest would be subject to 30. Is that right? And do we then need to amend the recommendations, or has it not been mentioned because that's simply the status quo?
Yeah, I had one of those horrible moments when you realise when you're presenting a report that there's an error in it. So apologies. Yes, you're absolutely right. The Up Avon Way should have been mentioned in the recommendation. So let me just get the report. What we should have is under 6. I'd need to just quickly work out the exact wording, but if you refer to the plan on Annex 1, if you have that in front of you, there the proposal as taken to statutory consultation was for the length of Up Avon Way, as shown in the light blue colour, to be 20 mph. But in fact, if you refer to the plan in Annex 4, and again, apologies if it's not desperately clear, that what was not included in the report recommendation was the length of Up Avon Way to the east of the junction of Burford Road. So that should remain as 30 mph.
So just to be clear,
Yeah.
are we looking at Annex 4 rather than Annex 1?
Yes, I think, and if we look at Annex 4, is probably the clearest way of doing so. And many apologies.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we are essentially looking at the section of Up Avon Way east of the Burford Road.
Yeah, and that should remain at 30. So we should really be adding a recommendation just to clarify.
And then subject to further consultation.
Yes,
the section of Up Avon Way west.
Well, in fact, that won't need further consultation because that was included in the original proposal. So if I just
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the further consultation is just specifically for that section immediately west of Burford Road,
Yeah,
where you've
yeah.
got the nursery and Carton Community College.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've got that's clear. And then I just wanted to go over the other point that Robin mentioned, which I think may be a misunderstanding, which is in recommendations 4 and 5. We talk about the section of Burford Road between Up Avon Way and Selwood Drive remaining at 20 as per the original proposals. So,
correct.
and that is the section, I think, just to reassure Robin, that is the section outside Carston Primary School, which sits between St John's Drive, I think it's called, and Selwood Drive.
That's correct.
So there is that 20-mile-an-hour section on that section of road. So we've had there is clearly a lengthy series of public comments that have been made in the annex, and I just want to run through them. There's been extensive discussion with the town council, which has, I think, undergone a change of political control in the process. But I think we should note our appreciation to them, because I think they've been very, very clear and very, very helpful in terms of their feedback. And there are a number of comments, including one that was made by County Council to the original scheme that talked about a blanket approach. But what we seem to have here is something that's not a blanket approach. It's always been targeted, and in fact, it's been reviewed and further tweaked, and has had a fair amount of local council design within that. There is then clearly a disjoint between the views of the town council and then the views as expressed in the public feedback. And the balance and the volume of public opinion here is unusually high. And I think I have to respond to the fact that there is an objection from 87%, I think it was, of respondents there. I don't know if there's anything more you'd like to say in terms of the accident record. I've mentioned the incident on Wickham Way, which I know did have a significant effect locally, although it doesn't appear to have been widely understood. Have there been any other significant incidents recently within Carterton?
Thankfully, I think checking the collision record, not in very recent years, but I don't think that in any way takes away from the desirability of introducing a 20 limit as recommended.
And of course, as we've said previously, it's interesting to note the contrast between the comments of Thames Valley Police here, and I'll come on to policing and enforcement, and the comments they've made to the other proposals, perhaps more recently. And there are a very significant number of respondents who have commented and cited as ground for objection the fact that Thames Valley Police do not enforce, as a rule, speed limits of 20 or 30 mile an hour in built-up areas in Oxfordshire, and that's something that I regret and continue to regret, and continue to press Thames Valley Police. Should I say Thames Water? Thames Valley Police to do better on and enforce. And I will cite the enforcement figures on 20 mile an hour zones by the police force in Cornwall, where they issue a substantial number of tickets, and I'm sure that is starting to have an impact in terms of road safety there. This is not a referendum, and these things never are. And I will always say to members of the public that people do need to understand that. It is also the case that I think it would be helpful to have got formal feedback from county councillors here about the revised plans. I had informal discussion with one of the county councillors who I bumped into earlier, but nonetheless, I think it's important to do that by way of transparency, and because these are schemes that are put forward by the local town or parish council and supported by the county council, and I think that's an important point to make. There are a number of comments in the consultation responses which I think I just have to focus on and address very, very, very briefly. It was comment 7. Someone has said 20 miles an hour doesn't reduce accidents, it just prompts them. Well, I'm not aware of any evidence whatsoever that reducing speed limits increases the number of accidents or the severity. In fact, all the evidence that I'm aware of is to the contrary.
Some our experience, yeah.
There were some other slightly peculiar comments in here. There was a comment 18. this will only impede drivers by creating more traffic. Again, I'm not aware of any evidence that changing speed limits from 30 to 20 in urban areas will increase the volume of traffic. Comment 67, when was the last road accident in Carterton? Well, we've mentioned the incident on Wickham Way, and I know I've spoken to Liz Wood, a town councillor for that area, who has spoken to friends and relatives of the child who was seriously injured there. As I say, life-changing injuries, and there clearly are significant concerns. There's then a question, just need speed cameras? Well, it would be nice to have speed cameras, but I don't think we are about to have some speed cameras on the Oxford Ring Road, but I think those are the first that we've been able to get agreement with Thames Valley Police for many years. 30 years. For fixed signs, yes. One of the bits of feedback that I've had, and it's notable from the map, is there are a number of areas where you've got unadopted roads here. And that's true of the MOD route, and there is something of an informal run, I think it's York Road, Britannia Drive Avenue, I can't remember what it's called, and Brycewood, because Britannia and York are part of the MOD estate, and there's also the Swinbrook Park estate, which is unadopted, and there are clearly challenges there. But I mean, I can certainly remember speaking to people in Carterton 20 odd years ago, and people complaining of the use of residential streets to run, I think particularly around Milestone Road, and there are some others there as well. Another comment 75, local speed limits are never enforced. Well, unfortunately, enforcement isn't something that we can deal with. There was then another comment, an 80% chance of surviving at 30 mile an hour is high enough. Well, I'm not really sure that agrees. It certainly doesn't tally with policies that any responsible authority would make. There are also no accidents in Carterton. Well, that clearly isn't the case. I'm a competent driver and do not need to be told what is a safe speed. It's possibly a niche argument for the abolition of all speed limits, but I don't think that's a majority view either. This is a blanket agenda. Well, very clearly it isn't, and the original proposals weren't. This is another step towards a total traffic ban. Again, that can't be true in rural West Oxfordshire. There are people who will always have to drive to get about, and there's nothing that we're doing here that goes against that. And then there was the best, which I'll save till last, which was comment 15. I'll drive more just to piss off idiots, and then names my predecessor, which I think sadly reflects a lack of understanding of what we're trying to do, what our purpose is here, which is to make sure that people can get home in one piece, frankly. I'm in a little bit of a quandary on this. On the one hand, I see a proposal which has been very clearly set out with really good involvement by the town council in response to that public consultation, which was on the original set of proposals. And we've had some feedback from one of the three county councillors who represent parts of Carterton. On the other hand, I'm also conscious of the role we have as an authority and as a consultor, and I think there is a need for us to ensure the integrity of consultation process and ensure that we seem to be listening. So it would be perfectly possible to say we've had a set of proposals here that have been suitably revised that we think probably makes for an acceptable compromise, and to go forward with the recommendations. However, I think there is also a case to say we're going to have to reconsult on a very small section around Carson Community College, but I think it might be best in the round to look at the integrity of the consultation process by going out and saying, we're very pleased with the work the Cardigan Town Council has done here, and we'd like to thank them for that. We think we owe it to the public to go back and see whether these proposals land better, because we do hear the volume of objections that were initially made. And I think that's what I would like to do here. So I think we can go out and reconsult, including on that additional element that's in the proposals, demonstrate the changes that have been made if we can, and then just go through that statutory consultation, then bring back that report and those proposals. Are we happy with that? Thank you. Thank you very much, and thanks, Robin, for that. I think that's a useful way forward. Yeah.
Just to confirm, I think that's a deferral. I don't think we need to add in a bit about further consultation. That would be minuted, and I think officers have taken that point on board.
Yeah, I'm happy with that. We now move on to a 463, I think. Yeah. Oh, it's on here. I too many bits of paper. There we go. And this is these are proposed changes to speed limits on the A361. Would you like to come forward and speak to these? And you've got 3 minutes, and then Anthony, you can come in.
Why not? Apologies for my misinterpretation on the last one. I was looking at the map, not the text at the top. A631 speed limits. We support these proposals because they will reduce road danger on specifically targeted sections of road. As the officer's report notes, they either have a high casualty rate or specific hazards. Speed reductions, in addition, bring air and noise pollution benefits. We're disappointed by how many consultation responses prioritise speed rather than showing consideration and responsibility for the safety of others, as required by the Highway Code. Cars, when driven, are inherently dangerous, but people with these attitudes are one of the main reasons that driving requires strict regulations and enforcement. We agree with the current head of commercial at Stagecoach that bus priority measures will be a good option to offset impacts from bus journey times if there are any significant ones identified. However, we note that speed limit changes will increase car journey times by more than bus journey times. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. That's very, very helpful. Part of the A361, including the part that runs through my division, has been reviewed recently, but this is a further set of proposals for the other parts of the A361 north of Banbury and then south of Chipping Norton. Anthony, would you like to just introduce the proposals, please?
No, sure. I think as you mentioned, we are progressing through a comprehensive review of all rural A and B roads speed limits in the county. We have already done half a dozen or so, and the A361 is the next one, as it were. It's been taken to formal consultation on 3 proposed new 40 mph limits. Just working from north to south. That's firstly in Wardington, on the length covering Wardington Hill, which is sadly a renowned collision hotspot, and we have been doing other measures in addition to the proposed speed limit, which have been implemented, but we consider that speed limit reduction is strongly advisable, and indeed, perhaps unusually, when taking it to statutory consultation, the police, Thames Valley Police, did ask actually if we could extend the scope of the proposal. So just to note that. And then working south in respect to the 40 limits, we're also proposing to at Bradwell Grove, which is south of Burford, not being geographic, sorry, on the length of the A361 south of Shipton under Wychwood, we are proposing a 40 limit between the village 20 mph limit and a group of premises, houses around about half a mile south of the main village. And then finally, in respect of the 40 limit on the A361 south of Burford, on the section currently 50 limit, but which includes Bradwell Grove, which is a residential development, the Cotswold Wildlife Park, and Crossroads, so a very busy junction, and also continues south to complete the full length of the existing 50 limit, which includes quite a challenging bend and crossroads. So those are the three 40 mph proposals. We also are proposing a 50 mph limit south of Chipping Norton through to Shipton under Wychwood, replacing the national speed limit.
Thanks very much, Anthony. That's a very, very useful summary, and we've got some maps within the area. I think the part of the road that I'm most familiar with, and in fact have driven on for many years, is the section south of Burford. But I'm familiar with the section through the Wychwoods and up to Chipping Norton. You've got a number of rural roads with junctions there where speed of collision could easily be a factor. The southern end of Shipton and Wychwood, where there's a proposal around the area that's known as Upper End, I think that makes a lot of sense. There are residential properties along that stretch. Driving north from Burford, the road is fairly straight and open, but also undulating, and people may not appreciate how residential it is, and then you suddenly come to the sharp right bend. And then the section by the Cotswold Wildlife Park, we know that in holiday seasons can get extremely congested. You've got Bradwell Village at the old Bradwell Grove military base, which is a significant development where a lot of mostly older people live. And again, that's on a road that's pretty busy. And also Williamscote, where I appreciate what you've put in the papers. I welcome the fact that Thames Valley Police have made no objection to these changes. I think that's very helpful. I just wanted to look at the observations by the bus companies, and I think Oxford Bus Company have looked at the A361 as a whole, because I don't see any effect of these proposals on the 488 route, which goes down from Banbury and then goes off towards Milcombe and Hook Norton after Bloxham. So I note what they've said there, but there are clearly some challenges in terms of what they say about the route that goes up between Banbury and Daventry. And I note that Stagecoach are talking about any measures that can be taken in terms of bus priority. I'm not aware of anything that would necessarily be easily brought forward there, but if there is anything, I'd be very conscious of that. And again, we welcome the participation of the bus companies, and I think it's only fair to highlight those concerns.
Indeed, I think very much respect the concerns of bus operators. I think it is, as you've mentioned, probably very difficult, certainly within the scope of what we could realistically offer on a rural route like that. I think often what the bus operators are seeking are measures that would improve their overall bus journey times, and I think, as you'll be aware, there are schemes in Banbury, for example, which look to improve bus journey times. So in a sense, we are already on the case on that.
Yeah. And then in terms of the public remarks, again, I mean, there are a number of remarks which don't seem to recognise what we're trying to achieve in terms of road safety. There are a relatively small number of responses for most of these measures, and there is a variation in terms of splits in terms of the speed limit changes. this is an area where you do get a lot of people driving very quickly. I think the report that's on page 469 is very helpful, detailing the collision history at Williamscott, where there's been a fatal accident, and there have been a number of serious casualties in the last few years. The section south of Chipping Norton, where there's a number of serious non-fatals and a large number of slight accidents, and again that road is increasingly busy. And then the challenge is that there have always been through that sort of wooded section south of Burford, where there are a lot of challenging things. So I note that there are some people who are not happy at what's being done here, but I think there is a valid road safety issue here that, again, with appropriate enforcement, I think will make a significant difference in terms of road safety. And on that basis, I'm very happy to approve the speed limit amendments there. Thanks. And thanks also for a very thorough report. We now move on to agenda item 9, and Councillor Morgan, sorry for keeping you hanging on there, but you appreciate we've had some fairly weighty things to deal with here. These are this is relating to Didcot on the A4130, Abingdon Road and Haddon Hill, where there are a number of improvements that are being proposed. We've heard from Danny Yee earlier, and I think what I'd like to do now is just invite Robin as the other member of the public to speak, and then come to Tony as the county councillor, and then I'll ask officers to introduce the report. So, Robin, if you'd like to come forward. You've got 3 minutes, and I'll look, and I'm assuming it's Ryan who is going to speak. It's Aaron. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Didcot is growing vastly in population, and it is currently doing so in a way that will increase car traffic both in Didcot and on all the nearby roads and settlements. The District Council and County Council have together approved designs that put increased motor traffic first, with poor designs for active travel tacked onto the side. We've been campaigning against this since 2015 and always told that the next one will be better. This latest version scheme is maybe a bit better, but has significant flaws. The roundabouts are, as the report notes, built with traffic volume as the prime concern, despite the LTCP user hierarchy and decide and provide approach. Active travel provision is often provided at what LTN 120 describes as the absolute minimum levels. So we are pleased to see the 5 metres of provision, which allows separation of pedestrians and cyclists here. As noted in the OLS consultation response, a buffer to the road is important, and personally I would sacrifice 30 centimetres of width for 30 centimetres of buffer. It is, however, the section of footway only that is of greatest concern, however. I thank officers for explaining that this is due to the parcel of land being under SODC control and not part of the development. This does at least start an explanation and maybe offer some hope. However, I think the officers' view that cyclists will dismount and use 3 crossings to cross to existing cycle facilities to the west, which is a shared path somewhat less than 2 metres wide, is somewhat optimistic. Can I suggest 2 things, please, to run alongside approval of this scheme? First, that we both write to South Oxfordshire District Council to ask if they would give, sell or allow access on the 130 by 1 or 2 metres strip of land that will be required to enable a shared path, perhaps when the route is adopted. This will all be the same council in 2 years' time, regardless of the result of LGR, so let's not be too precious. Second, there are a lot of developments and new routes in this area, and it is not at all clear how they are all intended to join up to us, and this was not covered in the LC whip. Could we have a meeting, including our local group in Didcot, so that we can understand the bigger plan and how we might contribute constructively? Thank you.
Thanks, Robin, and we'll come to both those points. I think I'll go to Councillor Morgan next. Tony, you've got 5 minutes.
Thank you, Councillor Epps. I very much welcome the safety improvements generated by the crossings. At the start of last month, a young resident was knocked down and broke their pelvis, and because there is no crossing in that area. So therefore, the crossings being provided are very much needed. And regardless of the other outputs, I want them done tomorrow, please. You know, I realise tomorrow is not an option, but I want them delivered for residents as soon as possible, regardless of the others. I will welcome the Cabinet members' comments on the resident request for a quiet toucan crossing in one of the locations. I haven't seen the output from that, but I would welcome what the Cabinet members' view is on that, please. Integrated cycling provision is essential, and where separate cycling and walking facilities are not possible, the path should be joint use, as mentioned by 2 previous speakers. This is actually yet another reason why OCC should forward fund MPR3. Forward funding MPR3 for the bit that should be funded by Bloor Homes will take traffic away from this location. And I would ask the Cabinet member just to think about that if enterprise zone money can be used for the Cowley branch line, which nobody in the enterprise zone will actually benefit from, then forward funding the MPR3 scheme, which money will come back eventually from Bloor Homes, is an absolute no-brainer to me. So I would ask the Cabinet member to think about that. That will take traffic away from this area, and it will enable the 20 mile an hour to be put in and the road to be narrowed. I declare a small amount of interest here as a cabinet member in South Oxfordshire, although not directly responsible for this bit, but with my sort of Didcot hat on, the proposal made by Robin just now seems eminently sensible. As noted before in correspondence with officers, there is no joined up approach in Didcot, absolutely none whatsoever. We get little bits of piecemeal parcels provided to us. It needs a joined up approach to look at how we join up walking, cycling, bus provision, and on a new estate, the X32 still has very, very few services in the evening and none on a Sunday. So we are encouraging people to move in. 1,000 houses occupied, but the bus service isn't there. So when people make a decision about buying a car, they tend to buy one because they have to. And as well as car movements on the whole, we need a joined up approach for the whole of that area of Lady Grove, please. And while we're doing that, it must include the very dangerous Abingdon Road, Burton Agnes Road junction, where there have been numerous accidents. And as I've mentioned to officers and your predecessor, Gareth, before, if we don't do this, there will be a coroner's report on this. And I don't think that OCC will come out very well at all in it. There is something physical needs to be provided at that junction. Absolutely certain about this. And that needs to be part of the holistic approach to walking, cycling and movement across the whole of that area of Didcot. But I'm very, very happy to support the proposals, and thank you, Councillor Epps.
Thank you very much, Tony. That's very, very helpful. Could I ask Aaron to, I can only see one set of people or papers with my glasses. Aaron, would you like to just introduce the report, please?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Epps. Yeah, so this paper is seeking the approval for numerous pieces of highway infrastructure, including 2 new toucan crossings on Haddon Hill, 2 new toucan crossings on the Abingdon Road, 4 new bus stops with shelters and clearway markings on Haddon Hill, and 2 on the Abingdon Road, existing sections of footway to be upgraded to create shared use cycle and footway facilities, and then also new sections of segregated cycleway facilities along both Haddon Hill and the Abingdon Road. These requirements are part of the developers' Section 106 planning obligations, and I think in general the scheme is fairly well supported. just a couple of concerns and objections, as we've already heard, in relation to the cycle infrastructure proposed along the Abingdon Road. I think there are valid points, and OCC's preference would be to have a 3-metre shared footway cycleway along the entire length along the eastern side of the Abingdon Road, but as I've sort of stated in the report, due to land constraints that fall outside of the developer's control, that wasn't possible. We have engaged with SODC and put them in contact with the developer to explore the possibility of enhancing that route to 3 meters, but unfortunately this was something that the developer didn't wish to explore, and within the requirements that they're obliged to deliver within the 106, it actually states a minimum 2 meter footway along this section, and it states 3 meters where possible. So we have kind of explored the potential of enhancing that section, and I think potentially now it could be something that our LC Whip team pick up in the future and see what opportunities there are there to further enhance this route. I think on the more wider joined up sort of thinking along the whole corridor, Katie, are you on the call? Are you able to answer that one from a planning perspective?
Sorry,
your mic
Yeah.
down. Okay.
You're either on mute or there's that you've got an audio issue there. We can't hear you.
It might be that your mic isn't coming down. There you go.
Apologise. Yeah, I've had it
That's-
up here
that's
for the
better.
whole time, so I could have a drink of water. Apologise. Yeah, absolutely. I don't think I'm probably the best person to comment on a conjoined approach from a perspective of wider placemaking, because I'm in the transport development management team, so that would probably fall more to our place planning colleagues for a wider discussion. However, absolutely, in terms of the HIF1 scheme and MPR3, which are wider strategic schemes coming online in this area. HIF, as you know, is obviously being constructed as we speak and is due to open in, I think it's 2028. And then MPR3, which again, we're having those discussions with Bloor, who are delivering the Lady Grove East site to deliver that. There will be a dramatic reduction in traffic along Abingdon Road. That is evidenced through the HIF1 modelling, which sees HIF1 and MPR3 in place. However, in terms of opportunities to explore what can happen along Abingdon Road and its function, again, that's not something I can necessarily comment on. It will provide opportunities, of course, to look at the wider function of how that's treated, but yeah, I think that's all I can say at this stage, I'm afraid.
Thanks very much. Aaron, is there anything more you want to say?
No, I don't think so. I think I've covered everything I want to say. I'm happy to answer any further questions you may have, or
Yeah, thanks. On the face of it, this is one of these interesting cases where, if you take the report at face value, you've got a number of measures which have got some pretty strong public support, albeit from a very, very low level of comments, and you've had largely support from the county councillor. However, subsequently, we've heard a number of really quite significant concerns. And looking at it as one, it seems as though we are in a case here where there are some historic Section 106 obligations that are based on county council policies as they were 10 or so years ago, having a guess. And I guess my first question was, are we essentially hamstrung by those very different objectives that really don't prioritise active travel in the way that we would seek to do now.
Should I come in now? And yeah, absolutely. I think when we started looking at the planning application, this was back in 2019. I wasn't the first officer on it, it was one of my colleagues, but I took it over. And from that early planning stage, we were requiring that the developer deliver a 3-metre section. That was our preference, and that's what we continue to say in our planning responses. However, looking at the infrastructure that we ended up securing, because it mitigated the impact of the development and it met the 3 tests, I wasn't able to uphold an objection based on sort of providing wider infrastructure. So what I was able to do was include in the 106 a clause which said that was our preference, to have a 3-metre shared use. However, it's not down to OCC to do land assembly for the developers. So that was a matter that hadn't been agreed or further discussed. So that was where we were left. So unfortunately, yes, they are meeting their obligations in this respect.
Yeah, and Robin Tucker in particular, I think, mentioned this challenge about this strip of land that's owned by South Oxfordshire that would enable a shared path. And if you turn to pages 5089, section 25 of the report, it talks about the efforts that have already been made there, with South Oxfordshire being willing, I think, to explore a potential solution, but a developer basically saying, as far as I can see, we've got our 106, we will meet our obligations and do no more, and in effect do the bare minimum. And I wonder whether a letter, rather than going to South Oxfordshire, which I'd be very happy to write, should really go to the developer to say, look, there is a very clear aspiration here and a willingness to cooperate. Are you willing to do the right thing? We can but try. There are then a number of other comments which Danny made earlier, which I think are important. And I don't know why we've ended up creating a cycling footway, and Phil Whitfield's no longer here, but we've just passed a set of measures to ensure cyclists don't have to dismount around temporary utility works, except when absolutely necessary. Yet here we are putting in permanent measures where cyclists would have to dismount. Surely that can't be right, or does that go back to the fact that we're just hamstrung by previous Section 106 obligations?
Yeah, I think exactly that goes back to the fact that we're stuck with these Section 106 planning obligations, and at the very bare minimum, they have to provide a 2-metre footway width along that section, and as far as the developer's concerned, they've satisfied that, and they wasn't willing to explore enhancing that section any further due to the land constraints, which we've already touched on. I mean, I think it's sort of envisaged that at that point, the cyclist could cross at the Toucan crossing to access the existing cycle infrastructure on the opposite side of the road to continue along the Abingdon Road, or there's a cycle track along there as well. But we can look into providing a dropped curb and cycle symbols in the carriageway to enable cyclists to rejoin the carriageway at that point, should they wish to, as Danny suggested. We can certainly look into that with Bloor Homes and definitely consider it.
I think if we can do that, I don't know whether that necessarily needs minuting, but I think it can be recorded in the minutes. And Danny made a couple of other comments about reducing the speed limit to 20 miles an hour on the section of road that lacked cycling infrastructure. That would presumably mean a further consultation, would it? Yes. Getting nods in the room. we do seem to have a bigger problem overall in Didcot, where there is an awful lot of growth going on, and a lot of it historic, and we are sort of playing catch up in terms of the need to provide infrastructure from a time when, unfortunately, our policies weren't as solid as they are now. And that means there are odd little pots of Section 106 and agreements here and there, without the sort of overall joined up approach that I think Councillor Morgan and Robin were talking about. And I certainly think we should have a meeting involving local groups and I think county councils in Didcot. And I was talking to the MP recently about something elsewhere in the town. I think there may well be appetite with Olive Glover to try and look at the bigger picture and see how everyone can add to that and look at the position in terms of the LC whip. And hopefully that would have some merit. Councillor Morgan made a number of comments, including highlighting a serious collision. I think I'm right in recalling what he was saying was he supported the Toucan crossings. He may try to tempt me into conversations that occurred at Cabinet about enterprise zone money. I would dispute what he says about no residents in Didcot benefiting from the county branch line, but I think there is a case to be made about MPR3, which I recognise, but that's not something that we can pick up today. I think there is clear frustration that this could be better, but I think from what I'm hearing, given the constraints of the existing planning process, all we can do is write back to the developers to raise the point about the need to create a shared footway, which is highlighted in paragraph 25 of the report, and try and ensure that we have a joined up approach that will pick up some of the other issues here, pick up the sort of discontinuity that we get. I was in Didcot last week in footway cycleway provision that's come from the historic approach, and look at how we might be able to come up with something that's more joined up. Using what resources we may have, but being realistic about the limitations of that and needing conversation with other colleagues about enterprise zone money. I think that's probably the best way forward that we can get to here, because this is a relatively self-contained package of work to discharge obligations that were we making them today, I think we'd make differently. And I think that's the key note. And this has been a theme that's run through all of this week, in all of the discussions that we have through infrastructure and where we're being asked to deliver more homes, economic growth, and so on. We can only mitigate that and provide the infrastructure based on the policies and the rules we have now, not what will be needed when these things are thought through. And that's one of the big challenges we have in local government, and indeed will have much more if government decides to fragment local government in Oxfordshire. But there we are. We await news of that with eager interest. On that basis, I'm happy to accept those recommendations, and we will write to the developers, CC South Oxfordshire, and we'll set up that meeting. I think that would be really, really useful. Much as I'd like to go further, I don't think we can here now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, we next turn to page 525. Botley Road. And we have no public speakers on this, but there have been some comments. I think Craig is going to introduce this item, which is about height restriction and parking amendments as a consequence of the reopening of Botley Road, which we are all looking forward to. Craig, would you like to introduce your report, please?
Thanks. I'm just bound to say it's not actually my report. I'm here because others aren't able to make it, but I do know enough about it to be here today, of course. I think the report is self-explanatory. It's about introducing mandatory height limit for the bridge, the new bridge that was introduced early this year. The height is greater than it was before, which will mean that standard double-decker buses will be able to go under it, which hasn't been the case for many years. The actual height is very slightly higher than the height restriction that's been advertised through formal consultation at 4.4 metres, but it's possible to introduce an exemption to allow those standard height double-decker buses at 4.42 metres to go under it. That doesn't need to go on the signs, that can just be in the order. That's a fairly standard practice. And the other, that's a significant benefit for the future for investment in bus fleets and so on. Obviously, that goes together with all the other significant enhancements that we'll get when the road opens again in terms of cycling and walking facilities and so on. We're looking forward to that very much, as you say, Councillor Epps. The other things that were advertised formally were the removal of some car parking on Cripley Road, a small amount of shared use parking just north of its junction with Botley Road, and a very small amount of residents only parking slightly further north on Cripley Road as well. There were some concerns about that, given the limited amount of space that there is for residents parking, in particular in the vicinity. As a result of that, and further checking and discussion with Network Rail and consulting sort of some of the sort of engineering drawings, we've established that we will need to remove the shared use parking, which is a sort of small amount of parking just north of Botley Road Junction, in order for the new access from Cripley Road onto the new Roger Dubman Way to operate safely. That's not something we can change. There is potentially not the need for us to remove the small amount of residents parkings, at least in at the start, and so we're suggesting that we don't remove, I think it's 7.5 metres of permit holders only parking, and that's as a result of listening to the feedback that we've received during the consultation, and so it does demonstrate that it's always good to make comments on proposals such as this with your resident or a stakeholder, because it is possible for changes to be made in response to that, which we're showing here. I think that's probably about as much as I need to say on this report. I don't know whether you have any further comments, Councillor Epps.
Yes, thank you, Craig. That's very helpful. There are two parts to this. I think the parking part and the maximum height part. And the maximum height part has come as part of the long-term discussions with Network Rail. That bridge is effectively built, and whereas in the report, I think there's a detail that double deckers can get under it because there's it's tight but it's doable. We're not back in the days where you used to have extra small double decker buses serving the Botley Road, which I used to get back in the day, and so it will be a lot easier for our new electric fleet to operate under there. I think the only challenge is around the warnings and signage that will be needed coming in from Botley Road, particularly to the west, to ensure that any high vehicle knows that it needs to turn around before it gets to the bridge. But I'm assuming that there is going to be considerable signage there, because I think the last thing we want is someone in a lorry to strike this rather expensive bridge.
That's right. Signage will be in place.
Yeah,
and the bridge is also adequately strengthened as well. So if there were to be a very unfortunate incident,
no, indeed,
able to withstand those kind of strikes. But we would want to prevent people from getting that far. Absolutely.
You'd certainly want to prevent people from weakening it. Okay, and that then leads on to the issue of parking amendments, where there's clearly some concerns locally, because I think that's an area where parking is particularly tight. there are a lot of plans with the western access for the station, and if if expansion of Oxford Station takes place, there might be quite a lot of pressure on that on that western side. I understand what's being said in terms of that small area of shared use parking bay, and that's what two, three vehicles could fit in that. Probably two, I'd have thought.
No more than that. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a relatively short, a small number. There are concerns from the county council who comments the consultation on the height of the bridge seems absurd. How can anyone oppose it? But I think that's a statutory obligation. And is there any way that parking spaces can be replaced nearby? I suspect the issue there is just physical road space or the lack of it.
I can answer that. I mean, yes. I mean, it is very tight around there. I think I can't remember in the report we've committed to as part of the future reviews of the CPZ and nearby CPZs to see whether it's possible to introduce some replacement, but it's not something that's going to be easy to find. But we'll certainly consider it. I mean, in terms of dropping off, I mean, for example, some people were concerned about the loss of the shared use because it would mean it'd be harder for people to drop off people to catch trains and so on. You can, of course, do that on double yellow lines without a formal parking bay if you're just dropping off and picking up. In which case, actually, you could probably do it in the location of that existing shared use bay that we're suggesting we're removing, as long as you're not causing an obstruction for that for a very short period that you are dropping off and picking up. It's just we can't have something that will allow people to park there for any length of time. Because of course it might obstruct the access to Roger Dublin Way, as I mentioned before.
Indeed. And I totally understand, reading through the comments, there is some frustration at the experience that residents of those roads have had for the last 3 and a bit years, which I totally empathise with and feel their pain. And residents clearly do have that entitlement to return to a further way of life, even though there might be a little bit more traffic passing by. I think we need to do this. I think this is an area where we will need to look to a CPZ review to try and deal with the parking situation, rather than deal with an area where land use is just so tightly constricted, and there are going to continue to be rail station works for a while and related to Botley Road. And there is some support for the measures, and people understanding that they are appropriate, and we do need to move these forward. So I think, well, I understand the concerns. I think we need to approve this and then deal with the pressure for parking space in this by way of a future CPZ review. So on that basis, I'm happy to approve recommendations. Thank you. Next, we come to Wantage Manor Road. And at any time parking restrictions. And the officer here is it Clever or is it Ryan who's going to speak? Both. Who wants to go first? Clever, do you want to go first?
Yes, thank you. This scheme is a result of the development of the Wantage Football Club premises. And because they've not included in their scope of works increasing the number of parking bays on their property, there was chance that traffic would be parked along the Manor Road. So to avoid that, we have proposed parking restrictions in a way that it will not cause possible accidents when users coming from the football pitch would be joining Manor Road. They will need to have adequate visibility to see the traffic that is using the main road. And that's the reason why we put it across. And there were just 2 objections for the proposal and 23 supports, which is an overwhelming support to that, and probably appreciating the risk that is being mitigated. The concerns that were there were just looking at extending the limits of that restriction, which in all fairness, looking at the approach that we had, that was to keep clear all the approach to the junctions that we have, one being to the car park that we are encouraging people to be using, and the other one at the service road from servicing properties 1 to 17. So with all that included in the restriction, then we felt this work has been done. So yeah, that's the brief of the scheme.
Thank you. Ryan, do you have anything to add?
No, I think Cleaver's covered everything there. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we have no public participation on this. We have support from the majority of members of the public and the councillor. There are no obvious questions to ask. There are some minor concerns, but I think there's an acknowledgement that this is probably the easiest way to deal with the increased activity. It's clearly a new facility, which I think most people will welcome. Unless anyone's got anything else to add, I'm very happy to approve the recommendations. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent. And now move on to agenda item 12, and I was going to give our work experience guests, we have some work experience students, in a bit of a geography test by asking them what the quickest way to Goddington was from here. So this is a approval of 20-mile-an-hour speed limit on the unnamed road that runs through Goddington, which is just the other side of Bicester. Anthony, would you like to introduce this?
Yeah, this is clearly a fairly minor scheme. It was one that we invited the parish meeting to participate in the 20 programme, probably about right at the outset of the programme. At that time, talking probably 22, that they declined, but I think they had a change of heart in earlier in the year, and they asked if they could be included. We saw no reason not to, and so we engaged further with the parish meeting, and just to confirm the scope, there currently is no speed limit. Sorry, rephrase that. Currently, the national speed limit applies on the road, and yes, with that process of the parish meeting, who themselves engaged, or at least the parish meeting chair engaged with residents, I think the majority view was to proceed, and that's a proposal we've took to consultation.
Thank you very much. And this is at the northeastern corner of the county, on the Buckinghamshire border, a very small hamlet, with, as you say, a parish meeting. And one of the beauties of parish meetings, as I know from my division, is that they are a meeting of the parish, and therefore can be of one view at one meeting, and then different people will turn up, and you'll get a slightly different reflection of opinion. I think we see this within the report here. This is a hamlet that has effectively got one road in, one road out. I believe so. So it is effectively a cul-de-sac. There are some comments that have been made that, you know, it's something that is relatively low impact, but there is clearly a fair amount of support that 20 miles an hour is the right speed for people to take in the village. There are clearly mentions of a freight company and a number of HGV movements in the area. And balance of comments was pretty much 50-50, I think, I'm right in saying. Yeah. But I think on this basis, it's the right thing to introduce a speed limit that's appropriate to a built-up area, and there doesn't seem to me to be any reason why we shouldn't follow through and approve these recommendations. Thank you. And then last but by no means least, we come to Widford near Swinbrook, and the proposed speed limit there. And this is a case where Swinbrook decided a few years back, I think, to introduce a fairly extensive 20 mile an hour limit through Swinbrook village, but the parish is Swinbrook with Widford, and this is Widford just catching up.
I think from memory, what happened is when the Swinbrook 20 went in, they did package the current Widford 30 with that. So that's been in place probably about 6-7 years now, because it predated the OCC funded 20 mph transformation programme. Subsequently, the Swinbrook Parish Council, Swinford and Widford Parish Council asked if we could reconsider the current 30 mph at Widford, account of its characteristics and in the light of, in a sense, amended policy that accompanied the transformation programme, which didn't apply when we were doing the initial 20 mph in Swinbrook. We judged that the criteria for a 20 were met at Widford, and therefore we're happy to progress that as part of the 20 mph transformation programme, and accepting that it is quite a sparsely built up section of route. Nevertheless, particularly at weekends, has a lot of recreational use, particularly by walkers. So, and although there is an adjacent public footpath network, many walkers to access it that go through, have to walk on the road between Swinbrook and Widford and beyond.
Apologies. We have two members of the public, both from Swinbrook and Widford, I think, supporting, and then we have an objection from Uppington and an objection from Henley-on-Thames. On the basis of, in fact, three people locally supporting and no other objections, I think on the basis that there is clear local support from within the villages, I'm very happy to approve those recommendations. And with that, I declare the meeting closed. Thank you very much.